level up, 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 level up.
Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up, don't give up the fight. Preacher man, don't tell me heaven is under the earth. I know you don't know what life is really worth. It's not all that glitters is gold. After story had never been told, so now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up.
KBLA Talk 1580. We're getting up and standing up for your rights every single day, and I hope you are standing with us. Do not forget to get the app. Give it to yourself for Christmas. It's free. Give it to yourself for Kwanzaa. It is absolutely available wherever you get your apps, on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. Just type in KBLA 1580. Download the app on your phone, and you can listen to us wherever you go. Plus, our podcasts are available for free wherever you get podcasts, and you may have missed some compelling conversations. I hope that you will tap in and get them on the app. You can also find them online wherever you get your podcasts. You can find them on our website, just the last few. And we offer updates and special contests and things on our app. When you download the app, it makes us stronger because we rely on you. We don't have the giant corporate backing of some other media outlets. We have people power. We have the Hood Grapevine, and we so appreciate you for making things possible for us, for being our KBLA delegation, and that is the way forward in this battle. And it really is a battle to have more media ownership by Black folks, and media ownership, not just the outlet, but the means of distribution, so that our voices can be heard. Because like Dr. Melina Abdullah said, until the lion has his own historian, the hunter will always be the hero. We are the lion's historians, telling the other side of the story, and so honored to be so. Gripping this mic is a privilege, and I'm honored that you have allowed me to do so for all these years. Excited to welcome into the space an Emmy and Peabody Award winner, the creator of something called Translash Media, a cross-platform journalism, personal storytelling, and narrative project which produces content to shift the current culture of hostility towards transgender people in the U.S. And as part of her work at Translash, she hosts the Webby-nominated Translash podcast, as well as the investigative limited series, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, A Plot Against Equality. Journalist Imara Jones, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate you stopping in. You are working on so many different levels. I think something that it seems like we have in common is this ability to be a podcaster, a journalist, a creative, but also an activist in the space, and unapologetic about that.
I think that what I tell people is that I produce media, and because I produce media that tells the truth, people think that it's activism, and I think that's a huge commentary on our society.
Yeah, I guess so, but when I read that you chaired the UN high-level meeting on gender diversity, that to me is activism, producer or no producer, right?
Yeah, but I think that even in that role, what we were doing was coming together in the UN, which is, not like, a flaming kind of progressive, institution, a very conservative institution, and having a conversation about the reality of expanded gender in the world, because it is a fact, it is a reality, it is something that happened as long as there's been recorded human history and is happening now. And so I think that it was, again, about the reality. And so, that's what's interesting to me, is that we're having debates about things that increasingly across the world and all cultures everywhere are just being accepted as fact.
When you say gender expansion, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that gender by its nature is expansive. I think that what's happened is that we had a very narrowly imposed view of gender driven by a Western understanding of gender, as well as the tie to gender to race and capitalism, it being tied to reproduction and who can reproduce and who's valuable and who's not, and how to make them valuable or how to devalue them. And what happened in that process is that the range of gender identities that existed in pre-colonial Africa, the range of gender identities that existed in the Americas, the range of gender identities that existed in places like the Philippines. I mean, all these things that are well documented eventually were oppressed. And people were penalized and killed and forced into two narrow genders that were tied to capitalism and this idea of reproduction. And so what we are doing and what's happening is that the natural process of gender diversity in human beings is just reasserting itself.
It's interesting you say that. This is going to sound weird, but when I was in college, which was a long time ago, I had a little personal crisis about, spiritual identity and understanding it. It was really around feminism, actually. But my godmother was Audre Lorde, and I remember calling her. She was in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and asking her, what is the role of women in traditional African spirituality? Because I was getting this, I guess I'll call it a Western filtered version of what seemed to me like really sexist, right? And the question for me personally was, do I have to submit to that if I'm going to really be a spiritual person, or is this some kind of colonizer's version of African consciousness? And she pretty much said what you just said, which is that when you go to pre-colonized African societies, our ideas about gender and gender roles are very different than what we consider sort of what we accept as an Afrocentric viewpoint in the Western context.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's absolutely right. And it's not only gender roles were different. I mean, African women were warriors, right? African women were rulers, right? All of these things that, one of the largest resistance to colonialization was in Angola, led by an African queen, right? So I think that, even within the context of the idea of two genders, the idea of gender roles and where we're talking about now, pre-colonial Africa, was vastly different than what exists now. Decision-making was totally different, et cetera. But even within that, there was an understanding that there were people who were born in bodies that we would now call cis, but who were trans, and those people had space in those societies. There were people who were gender nonconforming. There were people who what we would call are gay and lesbian, and they were naturally a part of those societies. And what happened through the process of enslavement was the reduction, the erasure of those complexities, those differences, because everyone had to be forced into a role of being what we would call a man and a woman solely for reproduction in order to keep the slavery machine going. And that's been the experience of a great many people who have experienced, imperialism and colonization, and we have to recognize that. And for you, that impacted you personally in terms of what you were observing was the narrowing of spiritual leadership, but that was the experience of millions of people in countless ways that we can't imagine. And so we have to expand our imagination. We have to embrace what was erased. We have to acknowledge what has been forbidden, and that is that people of African descent have always acknowledged a range of genders, a range of gender identities, have always been what we would call in modern terms gender expansive. And honestly, a great many of the traditional African religions have that as a part of their ethos and understanding.
So when we talk about, gender being on a spectrum, right? Not just man and female and male and female, not just sort of this binary model. I think a lot of people do think of that as a modern phenomena, something that is part of what some folks will call an agenda or a newfangled way of looking at the world. And it sounds like you're saying that is not the truth.
I mean, it's fascinating. As long as we have had recorded history, there are paintings of people or representations, I should say, of people that we would call transgender, or that we would call, being gay or lesbian. And so what is modern is the idea that there are only two genders. That's actually what's modern. That is not something that you see vastly around the world until 500 years ago. And that's exactly at the time of the rise of colonization and imperialism, and of course, as we've discussed here, enslavement. So what's new is the thing that we're living in. Of course, because as human beings, we don't live lives that are thousands of years old or hundreds of years old. It's easy for us to think that whatever we're living in is the defined reality.
How it's always been, right?
Yeah, sorry. But when you take a step back, you see that that's not the case. And I think that what's fascinating is that it's not new. It's very, very, very old. And we have to disabuse ourselves of the idea that our identities, that our identities began when our feet touched these shores.
So from the perspective of, just observation, it does seem like there are more trans people now within my own lifetime today than when I was a kid. You know what I mean? It seems like it. You certainly see more kids in high school and even middle school struggling with their gender identity, and this has become, of course, a political flashpoint. What do you attribute that perception to?
Right. It is a perception and it's a reality. I don't think that the numbers of trans people have changed throughout history. It's always been, not a large number of people, let's say. What's different is that we are living in a society where people have been able to find community in new ways, to validate their identities, and to live as they actually are. That's a huge part of the shift. I think that for me, for example, I grew up in Atlanta in the 1980s. I didn't know any trans person. I was trans at that age. I didn't see any representation. No one ever talked about it. I didn't know a thing about it. But I knew that my gender was different than what my body was expressing. And I've known that my whole life. So we know that transness is independent of these external factors. What is happening is that because of technology, people are actually able to find community and to understand that they're not crazy. And to give you an even broader context, though, for this, one of the things that happened, of course, is Stonewall. And with Stonewall, which ironically was led by trans people of color, there began to be an LGBTQ rights movement. And of course, eventually gays and lesbians, particularly white gays and lesbians, stepped to the forefront after trans people of color, Black trans people, had started that movement. But a part of that was more space to understand that you could be different in society. And what we're seeing is just the culmination of that movement over a really long time, combined with changes in technology, which have allowed people to find community and to find expression. And now young people are growing up and seeing that there are other people like them, and therefore are stepping forward even more. So I mean, for example, I was trans, and there was absolutely another trans person in my class when I was in elementary school. Absolutely. But we didn't have language for what we were. And we were not allowed to be who we were. And we were, our lives were threatened at an early, at least I remember for me at an early age. So I just think that, like, it's different because people have the ability to express themselves in new ways.
Talking with Imara Jones, podcaster, a Peabody Award-winning journalist. I'm not going to say activist because that is Imara Jones doing what Imara Jones does. And you're welcome to call in if you got some questions or conversation, 800-920-1580. Continuing the conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
From our heart to your heart. Happy holidays to you and the ones you love from KBLA Talk 1580.
This week at Target, get all your holiday shopping done with last-minute deals on must-haves and wants for the season. Discover big deals on toys and tech, plus top deals on clothing, beauty gift sets, and so much more. At Target, find all you need for the holidays. Shop great last-minute deals everyone will love, and get what you need fast with free drive-up. Hurry! Last-minute deals end Sunday. Score low prices and great last-minute deals now at Target. Exclusions apply.
This holiday season, Capital One reminds you to give yourself the gift of 1.5% cash back with the Capital One Quicksilver Card.
Can I earn 1.5% cash back on birds?
Birds?
What if you sent your true love 2 turtle doves plus a partridge in a pear tree?
Sure, but why would anyone want that?
The song was very convincing.
Earn 1.5% cash back on all your holiday purchases with the Capital One Quicksilver Card. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Imagine dreaming you had one chance to write a song that all the world would sing, and your dreams came true. Now imagine experiencing a life-altering health challenge with mounting medical bills that your share of royalties from that hit song can barely cover. The year? 1970. The songwriter? Nadine McKinnon. The recording artist? Donny Hathaway. The song?
Hang all the mistletoe, I'm gonna get to know you better. This Christmas.
A match made in heaven. Nadine McKinnon and Donny Hathaway. To date, over 300 artists have covered This Christmas. Unfortunately, because of industry practices and standards in the early 70s, Nadine McKinnon failed to protect her interests and did not benefit financially to the extent she should have. As we know, history is littered with countless untold stories of the accomplishments of hidden black female figures. For over 50 years now, we've been inspired by this heartfelt Christmas classic. Due to a sudden debilitating stroke, Nadine McKinnon is in need of our help to assist with massive medical bills not covered by our insurance. Please show your love to this inspirational woman and writer of our beloved classic. And this Christmas will be a very special Christmas for you and Nadine. Please contribute as your heart leads you. All donations are welcome. Go right now to the GoFundMe page for Nadine Scott McKinnon or head to the KBLA 1580 website. On behalf of KBLA Talk 1580, thank you in advance for doing your part to honor a true songwriting legend.
And this Christmas will be a very special Christmas for me.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
And my guest this hour is Imara Jones. She is a podcaster, a journalist, and the creator of the Translash Media Group, which is a cross-platform journalism and storytelling narrative project, Webby Award winner. Imara Jones, you make the point, you say you're just speaking the truth and people call it activism. And I get that. You talk about everything. You don't just talk about gender identity or your own experiences. You talk about all political topics, and hopefully, you'll come back and we'll chop it up about many, many things. But I guess I'm really starting with the focus on your gender identity, because I believe that there's a lot of misunderstanding, particularly in our community. We're progressive, but we're also largely African American, our KBLA delegation. And I kind of feel like if we had more clear answers and, we would have less hate, less division. We hear over and over again that the trans women, especially black trans women, are being murdered, for example, and that really, really troubles me. What do you make of that? Where is that coming from, in your opinion, and what's to be done about it?
First of all, you and I share, we are on the exact same page and the need to talk about this and to get clear answers and to allow people to ask their questions without judgment, because if we're able to do that, then we will have a less violent, more free, more open society and, of course, community. So thank you for this conversation, and I totally agree with you. I would say that what's fascinating to me about the murders of Black trans women is the way in which they actually track with the violence against Black women overall, right? And this is where it's really important for us to think about that there's this general hatred of anything that is Black, a Black woman, and the way in which our society values that. So what do I mean about how does it track with Black women overall, Black cis women? So we know that in this country that Black women have the highest incidence of intimate partner murders than any other group in this country, which means that when a Black woman is murdered in America, she is overwhelmingly murdered by someone that she is close to, someone that she knows, overwhelmingly an intimate partner. That is also true for Black trans women. Black trans women are murdered by people that know them. They are murdered by their intimate partners. They are murdered by the men who say, oh, you think you're going to leave me? No one's going to want you. No one else is going to have you, and I'm going to kill you. How many stories do we know about that for Black women overall? So what's fascinating to me is that there's this idea of the otherization of Black trans women, but when you look at the data, it actually tracks with the murder of Black women overall, which is about the hatred of Black women. And so that means that there's actually, in the way that we're able to navigate the society, there's an incredible overlap between the experiences of Black women and Black trans people. More specifically, it is people who are in relationships and or family members of Black trans women who murder us. Like,
wow.
That's what happens.
Oof.
That's who's killing us.
That's
it is
so
not,
terrible.
People are like, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a person who didn't know, or it's the panic attack, or the person should have disclosed. Overwhelmingly, these cases are men who are attracted to Black trans women who either were rejected by those women. That rejection turns into rage. That rage turns into murders. Secondly, or it is people who are in relationship with these Black trans women, and these Black trans women no longer want to have a relationship with them, and the men kill them.
Wow.
So I think that we have to understand that the murders of Black trans women track the murders of Black women overall in America, and this is what's happening, is that misogyny is what's killing Black trans women.
We got Morris on the phone calling us from Inglewood. Morris, you're on with Imara Jones. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Jones. Listen, everybody's
Miss Jones.
fantastic.
Miss Jones, if you're nasty. Yes. Okay.
Hey, listen, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. Everybody's paying taxes. So when you pay taxes, you're entitled to protections, rights, and privileges. I got a question for you. Is there a ministry out there, my brother or sister, that respects you as children of God, or do all of them demonize you? I'll take your comments off here. And good morning, Dominique. You all right?
Morning. Thank you.
Yeah, Dominique, thank you for correcting misgendering. I think it's important for people who are not trans to do that, so I appreciate that. I think that for me, yes, there are many places that do that. So ironically, there are lots of trans people in ministry. We're going to actually do a podcast episode on this Black trans people who are in ministry. So that laid to the side, There are Unitarian churches that welcome trans people broadly. There are some Methodist churches that UMC, not ANC, but UMC churches that welcome trans people. There's some Episcopalian churches that welcome trans people, especially those that are aligned with the Anglican Church. So I think
and the Pope has got like a trans little ministry, right? From what I was reading.
Well, he meets with trans. He has had regular dinners and conversations with trans people as a part of his signaling that he believes that trans people are children of God, and he's expressed that in various ways. So there's not, and also, like, to be honest, that was also a Christian framework. So Children of God is a Christian framework. Outside of Christianity, there are a lot of indigenous religions across the world, who native in nature, also African-based in nature, that recognize trans people. So I think within a Christian context, there is recognition, and then outside of a Christian context, there's a lot of recognition.
Talking with Imara Jones, we'll continue the conversation when we come forward. You're welcome in. It's KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The political leader of Hamas is in Cairo today to talk with Egyptian leaders about the Israeli hostages and a possible ceasefire. Egypt helped to negotiate a week-long ceasefire back in November that saw over 100 hostages released in exchange for 240 Palestinian prisoners. Israel's president said Tuesday they're willing to take another pause in Gaza to enable the release of hostages. In California, former NFL running back African-American Derek Ward is behind bars in connection with a series of robberies at businesses in Los Angeles. Ward, who was arrested in Van Nuys on Monday, won the Super Bowl with the New York Giants in 2007. TMZ reporting Ward used force and fear to take money from several businesses, including gas stations. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Don't miss out on new deals every day at Lowe's. Get up to 30% off, plus save an extra $750 on select major appliances. Valid through 12/20. Appliance savings vary based on purchase amount. Exclusions apply. While supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
USC's men's basketball team snapped a 3-game losing streak with a 20-point win Tuesday night at Alabama State. Bronny James scored all 6 of his points in the second half in his third game with the Trojans. He dropped 2 3-pointers. LeBron's son is still on a minutes restriction and continues to come off the bench. The Lakers and Clippers are back in action tonight. The struggling Lakers start a 3-game road trip tonight in Chicago. The Lakers are 1-3 since winning the in-season tournament. 5 p.m. tip-off in Chicago. The Clippers are in Dallas with their 8-game winning streak. During the streak, Kawhi Leonard is averaging 29.3 points and shooting 54% from the floor. Perhaps the most important stat for Kawhi is that he has played in all 26 of the Clippers games this season. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's the gift-giving season, and we have a gift for you. Visit us online at KBLA.store for holiday savings of 20% off all of our KBLA swag. For the best in merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store right now. And be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all our official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580, at 20% off, but only during the holiday season. Happy holidays.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. I was able to speak with one of the panelists, the owner of Kids Love. Take a listen.
So Kids Love, KIDSLUV, is a first-to-market zero-sugar, vitamin-enhanced functional beverage for kids.
So the zero sugar is really important because if not, the sugar gets on the teeth, it can cause cavities. So as a mom, I love this vitamins and hydration in one. Tell us what's happening here with Chase Bank today.
So I would say, I think what Chase is trying to do is create a community actually for entrepreneurs, a place where people can go. They have the space to do it. It's a beautiful space, and to be able to have these conversations. There are so many benefits to being a women-owned and certified business, from a standpoint of getting into stores, not paying the slotting fees of what it takes to be in stores. So I think Chase is trying to bring awareness to a lot of the things that people just don't know about, that not only the bank can help, but outside of the bank, their relationships can help create.
That's beautiful. And I know, this is how we build equity in communities of color, is kind of spreading that information and that knowledge. So thank you for being here today and doing your part and letting these women know that it is possible.
For KBLA 1580, I'm Maisha Cairo in the community with Chase.
When you're young, life is full of choices. Don't let opioids like highly addictive and deadly fentanyl take away your life with just one wrong pill. Addiction is a disease that can affect anyone at any age. But there is a choice to get help for this disease. Find medically proven treatment options, including virtual, at choosemat.org.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
You got a big mouth. Hello, Joe, you're up. Welcome.
We're unapologetically progressive, and we don't black down.
We don't, and we're talking this morning with Imara Jones, a Peabody and Emmy Award-winning journalist and podcaster. Also serves on the boards of the Transgender Law Center, Anti-Violence Project, LGBTQ+ Museum, New Price Agenda, and was appointed by Mayor Bill de Blasio to serve on the New York City Commission on Gender Equity. Before News, Traffic, and Sports, you mentioned misgendering. Morris inadvertently put a pronoun on you, which is not one that you use. And the whole conversation around pronouns apparently is a hot topic. It's a controversy. Why are pronouns so important? Why is it important? I even have a friend, a dear friend who I'd consider a progressive, who just struggles with calling people the pronouns that they desire. Why is that important?
It's important because it's a fundamental basis of identity and respect. As someone said, it was really funny. There's a meme that goes around, which is like, if people don't think that pronouns are important, just misgender a cis person and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. Like
yeah.
if I were to suddenly, said to the caller who identifies as he, him, if I suddenly said she, hers, they'd probably find that deeply offensive. It's because it goes against the very sense of who they are as a person and how they move through the world. It's no difference for trans people. It's just that people believe that they have the right to tell us what our gender is versus respecting other people's. And what we should do is respect everybody's gender identity, right? Because regardless of how a person presents, unless you have X-ray vision, you don't know what their bodies are like. You don't know what the composition is below what you can see. So we should just respect everyone's pronouns.
Another thing that you mentioned in passing earlier in the conversation was this idea of non-gender conforming, which is different than being trans or necessarily, I think people mix up gender with sexual orientation because the conversations sometimes go hand in hand, but it's not the same thing. And so what do you mean when you say gender non-conforming?
So there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, the trans umbrella in its most expansive includes people who are a part of what we call the trans-binary. And the trans-binary are people who move from being, male to female or female to male, right? So that's people who are in the trans-binary. But a great many people who are trans are not in the trans-binary. That is to say that they don't have a binary view of gender. And trans, because the word means transgender, means to move across. The word cis means to stay, right? So when we say cisgender, it means stays gender, right? Transgender means moving across gender. That root word includes people who are in the trans-binary, includes people who are gender nonconforming, includes people who are non-binary, right? But in our shorthand, our everyday understanding of people, when we say trans, most people think of people who move from one gender or another and exclude the others. And so we end up articulating, non-binary or these others. So I just wanted to give kind of that context. But because gender is a spectrum, it's expansive, there are lots of different genders, there are people who, in their composition, do not feel like they fit into one category or another. And so they will identify as either being non-binary or not conforming to gender. And gender non-conforming is a slight variation on this, meaning that you may have some alignment with your gender, but not complete alignment. So you're not really conforming with your gender in terms of a lot of times in terms of presentation. Non-binary is kind of a larger expanse on that one nuance. So the point here is that there's lots of different ways to express our gender, and we have to be open to all of them, and we need to be involved in an active conversation with people about their pronouns and how they refer to themselves, because we want to honor the dignity of each and every human being. And you're right, it gets conflated all the time in terms of sexuality and gender identity, and I think that, sexuality is about who you have sex with, right? If you're heterosexual, you have sex with the opposite sex. If you're homosexual, you have sex with people who have who have your same body and same body type and same gender identity. The same is true for people who are bi. They have sex with everybody. Gender identity is about how you identify in the world. Has nothing to do with who you have sex with. It is literally about what your gender identity is within the spectrum that we have of male and of man and woman, which is different than male and female. So that's a lot, but these concepts are a lot, and they are pushing us to expand our thinking, and I think ultimately to be better.
It really feels like a generation gap. I feel like Generation Z, for them, it doesn't seem very hard to understand at all. But for the X's and the boomers, even some millennials, it's a little bit more of a stretch. When you say there are a lot of different genders, I mean, do they have names? Like, how are we identifying these many genders?
So I think that in general, the way that we can think of is that there is cis. There is trans, which may mean trans-binary or the more expansive term of trans. You can also be gender non-conforming. You can also be non-binary. I think that
all of those are genders in themselves.
That's right.
Got it.
That's right. And gender identities. And so those are that's like kind of expansive. And within those, we broadly have pronouns, right? He, him, his, of course, she, her, hers, they and them. But there are also some people who refuse to use those, and they go by certain things like they. I mean, that's not common, but, it does exist. And so that's why, it's just important to ask people what their gender identity is. And if you get it wrong, because honestly, even people who are trans sometimes end up mistaking genders, then when the person says this, I'm actually, this is my actual pronoun, then we correct. And I think that a lot of times what we want to do with pronouns is we want to believe that we have the ability to look at the world and order people in the way that we want to. And I think that that's a part of the resistance a lot of times of people not using the right pronouns or subconsciously not doing that, because they were brought up in a world where they got to look at the world and impose their vision of the world on other people. And what pronouns actually make us do is to individualize the world. We have to look at people as people and to respect them as people. And it's easier for people who are younger because they are Generation Alpha, which is even younger than Gen Z, and some Gen Z, because they grew up. Like my cousins grew up with trans people, right? So it's really easy for them. And honestly, it's even easier for younger children. And this is a whole separate conversation about when people learn that they are a certain gender. You know, younger kids, like, I already remember this. There are times when you are a kid where you don't actually experience gender, you're just experiencing the world. And so they can be more open to understanding that gender is something that you grow into. I think that probably everyone has a story in their life where they said, oh my God, I realized this is when the world saw me as a certain gender. And I either corresponded to that or I didn't. But that means that gender is something that you're acculturated to, not something that you immediately understand from birth.
Not that she's a role model for anything, but Candace Owens famously makes the argument that if she identifies as a cat, that doesn't make her a cat. And she does not recognize trans women as women. I know that's true for J.K. Rowling, the lady who wrote the Harry Potter books, that kind of mindset is labeled TERF, right? They can be feminist women who don't believe or don't recognize trans women as women. Where does that come from, you think? And how do you receive that?
Oh my gosh, you know, like every one of your questions could be a program.
I know. Sorry.
No. It's a sign of a person who has a lot of depth. I think that. So here's the thing, right? What is a TERF? It's a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. It is a person, as you say, who says that they are a feminist, believing that women should have equal rights and the ability to control our lives equal to that of men, right? And a certain segment of those, I would say it's pretty small in the United States, actually, who say that they don't recognize trans women as women. Now, the good news is that there are plenty of feminists who are. Gloria Steinem, for example, recognizes trans women as women and says so flatly and without hesitation. And there are, lots of other examples like that. Fortunately, political leaders of all backgrounds. So that's a really important thing. But I think that where does it come from? Well, first of all, about Candace Owens doesn't recognize a great many things.
Yeah,
so, I don't know that I would like.
Just because you don't, you're right. You identify as white doesn't mean you're anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Candace Owens struggles with recognizing a great many things, but that point aside, I think that it comes from this idea. A friend of mine who is a professor believes that it comes from the idea that womanhood is based upon lifelong suffering.
And that interesting.
And that, she's a Black woman feminist scholar, and it's like I think that it comes from suffering, and that idea that if you haven't experienced gender-based violence, that you can't really claim womanhood. Now, that in and of itself is extremely problematic and troubling. It reduces womanhood to suffering. It means that the only way that you can ever be defined is through the negative and through pain. It also assumes that trans women have not suffered from gender-based violence our entire lives. It assumes that we don't have a great many common experiences. So I think that that's one thing. And also related to that suffering is the idea of suffering that is related to periods and childbirth.
Right.
And we also know that that's a misnomer because not every woman who is cis, who was born a cis woman and is marked on birth, not everyone who is a cis woman has a uterus, can have kids, has a period. Like all of those things that we would say when we try to reduce womanhood to the body of what we say as a woman, that definition excludes a great many women. I mean, are we saying, for example, that like older women who are in menopause are no longer women? And then you get into this thing, well, once upon a time in their lives they could, so that makes them like we get into this twisted kind of circle, whereas we have to recognize the way in which our society associates a set of behaviors and a set of experiences and outlooks, and that's one of the fundamental ways that we create gender. And we have to understand that trans women experience gender-based violence as well. Experience many of these common things. And so I think it comes from a reductionist view of womanhood that when you apply it, doesn't even apply to most cis women. It's actually a misunderstanding.
We're talking with Imara Jones, continuing the conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Hey LA, save water and put money in your pocket with rebates from LA DWP. Start saving with free shower heads and faucet aerators. Then save with every flush when you upgrade to a water-efficient toilet and get a $250 rebate. You can also save on every load of laundry with a high-efficiency clothes washer and get a $500 rebate. That's right, LA DWP customers can get $500 rebates on qualifying clothes washers. See all the ways to save at ladwp.com/save. Meet LA's most affordable health plan. This open enrollment season, LA Care Covered is proud to offer the lowest cost health plans in Los Angeles County, featuring zero cost preventive services to help you achieve your wellness goals. Be part of the region's largest HMO network, featuring UCLA Health, Optum, and allied physicians without breaking the bank. We are here to help. Call us at 855-222-4239 for enrollment assistance. That's 855-222-4239. LA Care Covered. Your wellness, our mission.
Today, young adults face big questions about their future. How will you make your mark? Do you want to be part of something bigger than yourself? Are you ready to learn new skills and make new friendships? Perhaps you have a dream that you're ready to make real. So, how will you make a mark with your future? As you embark on a journey toward finding these answers, the military can serve as a resource for providing help, information, and opportunities. A public service message from the Department of Defense. To learn more, visit today'smilitary.com.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of This Light of Ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This Light of Ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This Light of Ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
We're talking with journalist and podcaster Imara Jones. And so many questions, so little time. Perhaps she'll join us another day again. We're talking about this idea of TERFs, or people, particularly women that don't accept trans women as women. And I've seen a lot of conversation about this on Instagram too. Black women who are not political figures, just everyday Black women who feel somehow threatened. And I really don't have an understanding of it, but who feel threatened by trans women being accepted as women. Is there, I mean, is that's really what it is that would be your ideal?
You mean, yeah, I mean, because, I mean, trans women are women. I mean, like, I can assure you that if you and I talked about what our days are like, how people interact with us, whether or not people listen to us or not, like a whole host of other things, we won't have a lot of distance. We'll have very little distance in terms of like what our experience is, right? So I think that that's just a reality that like trans women are women and trans men are men in terms of how they experience the world and how the world like treats us, especially as Black people. You know, on some level, let me express some sympathy with these Black women. I mean, we have a history of Black womanhood being questioned.
Yeah.
We have a history of Black womanhood being very precarious in this country. Black women did not achieve full status in this country until 1965. That's when Black women became full citizens of the United States. Black men legally at least became full citizens, essentially 100 years before. So I think that like we have to understand the notion of the precarity of Black womanhood. We have to understand that Black women did not fully control our bodies until the 1980s. So I think that like and a part of the attack, the racist attack on Black womanhood is the idea that Black women really weren't women, that Black women are in many ways in the history of enslavement and through racial stereotypes are often represented as a point of denigration as being masculinized. And because Black women, according to these stereotypes, are masculinized, don't feel pain, other things, then are not essentially women. And so Black women are always fighting for the idea that they have space and equal rights as women. So I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for people who are afraid that trans women are a threat to Black womanhood, because in the way that racial stereotypes have been used in this country, that's understandable. It's not a far-fetched notion. I think what I would say to those women is that what you are doing by attacking and undermining Black trans women is that you are actually turning yourself into a tool of the racist enterprise. You yourself are practicing white supremacy because you are basing your idea of what womanhood can be, one, on white supremacist notions that we talked about at the top of the program, and two, you are assuming the idea that trans women are essentially masculinized women, and that any association with that for you would undermine or threaten your womanhood. And that in and of itself is also practicing white supremacy. And so I think that what we have to do is we have to drop these notions that we've been so acculturated with about who matters, who counts, what our identity is, and get to a much more firmer, open, historically relevant for us as Black people notions of our gender. That when you are attacking Black trans women as Black cis women, you are practicing white supremacy.
Are we making progress, Imara Jones, as a society?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, that's what's so fascinating about this moment, right? Is that, I mean, that's why I call Translash. The brand is actually transgender backlash, because on the one hand, there's so much progress, right? There's, of course, people that we would think of, Laverne Cox, not only Laverne Cox, there are, Black trans people who are environmental activists like Precious Brady Davis in Chicago. There are Black trans musicians like Honey Dijon. Like, there are lots of amazing people in our community who are doing amazing things, who have life chances that they never had before. And at the same time, we are facing a coordinated cultural campaign to turn Black cis communities against trans people. And those same people are also behind the legislative backlash that we are experiencing, and behind the co-opting of the Republican Party. And so the funny thing about many of the forces that are driving the anti-trans backlash is the degree to which they are also driving the undermining of voting rights for Black people. They are trying to split Black communities by saying there's some people who are historically Black and some people who immigrated here, when historically we're all the same people. If you were in Jamaica and you immigrated to the United States, you ended up in Jamaica for the exact same reason you and I binary in the United States, right? So I think that like all of those forces are working together, and that's why it's a confusing moment, because there's progress and there's a tremendous whirlwind that's trying to destroy it and to use the idea of trans people to undermine who we are.
Well, it's. I know we can find you at translash.org, translash.org. Any other contact info you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my handles are my name. Imara Jones. My name. It's very easy to find me on Twitter, on all of the social medias, as we say. So that's also a really easy way. As well as my own personal website, which is my name, in addition to the Translash website. And we've had such a full hour, we didn't even get to include like the role of intersex people in this conversation, which also throws a totally different idea of what our bodies are doing, and if our bodies are indeed binary as well, because intersex bodies are not binary. So even when people try to make biological arguments about there being only two, we know that the variety of intersex bodies in our society say that even isn't true. So this is an entire process of unlearning so that we can get to a new place.
We'll have to do a part 2. I'm out of time. Tavis Smiley's up next. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The political leader of Hamas is in Cairo today to talk with Egyptian leaders about the Israeli hostages and a possible ceasefire. Egypt helped to negotiate a